Yeah, definitely been a long, winding road here. It took 6 years to get to this point, so it's been a lot of ups and downs. But yeah, in terms of the general journey, coming out of college, I definitely was a big football guy, big math guy in general. I played sprint football in college, which I'm guessing no one in your room has heard of, but it's effectively football with a weight limit. So still varsity sports, still 11 on 11, full pads. Just the only caveat is you got to weigh in a certain amounts of play. So really awesome experience doing that. Played 3 seasons there at defensive line. Yeah, great times with that. And then also was a math major, stat minor in college, and did sports journalism for our school newspaper. So really, sports, football specifically, and data were a big part of my day to day life back at that point. And I wanted to figure out how to do that in the working world, and really just been stacking, little by little, different things to help me get to this point. I started out coming out of college working at UCLA football, volunteer status, just bottom of the barrel, trying to strap you away from the bottom to the top. And I thought I'd be there for longer than I was, but then that summer, 2019, when I was fresh out of college, got a job with the NFL doing research there. Ultimately, had to take the paid job over the volunteer one, so I jumped to that. Did 4 seasons there, which is how I met Edward originally, and I really enjoyed my time there. Ultimately, it was a pretty fun job. But if I'm going to say anything candidly, the qualm I'd have with that job is that it was ultimately a media job at heart, not a team job. So all the hard work you're doing is catered to making a TV broadcast look good or a Twitter channel look smart. It's not necessarily to help a team win or lose. And that's something I really wanted to chase. Just something I really enjoyed from playing football throughout my life. So I really wanted to, approach that however I could. That led to me working for a college football small startup called Championship Analytics in 2023 and 2024. Really cool stuff. A company not many people have heard of if you don't work in this world, but we have, or should say they. I'm not there anymore, but yeah, they have a lot of clients across the FBS and FCS. Some of the big name college football programs are using them, which the common fan doesn't know who they are. So that was really cool to kind of get the opportunity to do some stuff to help teams actually win as a third party, and then spent some time coaching high school ball in 2024 back in my alma mater in California. So I was juggling that with CAI Championship Analytics in 2024, and ultimately ended up getting this offer this past summer. So I moved here in July of this year, just before training camp. And like I said, a really long journey. I didn't think it would take 6 years to get here when I was coming out of college, but I'm here now, and you can't ask for more than that. So really, honored to be here, and really, don't take anything for granted on the way here, because all those steps helped me become better to the point where I could do this job capably today. Ideally, at least that guys behind me can answer that.
It is interesting, point to the assist guy there. It is interesting that when you're talking about data science, it is no different when it comes to sports in general, where when you are trying to track down jobs, you do have to move around a lot. It is very difficult, if not impossible, to stay in one city, in one location, and do exactly what you want to do. Can you talk about sort of the ambition and drive that's required that could involve, moving around, seeing different parts of the country, and what those sensibilities are when it comes to what different regions and different organizations are going to want from you as a researcher, as a data scientist, anything like that?
It's funny you mention that point, because I feel like until this job, obviously being in Buffalo, I feel like I had, unsustainably good luck in terms of location and not having to move very often. I'm born and raised in Los Angeles in Westwood, right near UCLA. So when I was working there, I was literally walking distance from the office I was working in. And then I was coming out of college, I applied to jobs everywhere. Small town jobs, random newspapers, random college football teams that are in the middle of nowhere. And I happened to get the NFL job, which was at the time in Culver City. 15-minute drive from the house I grew up in with my parents. So it was crazy convenient in that regard. I didn't have to right away out of college do the whole hop around the country, move apartment to apartment kind of thing. I spent literally the past 6 years in my parents' house, the house I grew up in since I was 2 years old. So I definitely had unsustainably good luck, and I was really privileged. I don't deny that privilege. That really helped me get to where I am today. A lot of people probably need to make more money right away, and they might have to give up on a dream. Like I didn't have to give up because I wasn't paying $1 of rent until I moved to Buffalo. So I don't deny that privilege. That definitely I had the gift, and I was gifted in ways a lot of other people might not be. But at the same time, like you said, it's still, even with that privilege being given to you, you still got to work hard and make the most of that privilege. And yeah, like you said, you got to be willing to pack it up and go wherever you need to go for a job you're passionate enough about. And all my family in LA, got so many friends out there, both people I grew up with and the people I met there over the past 6 years. So it is tough to leave a group like that behind. I'm still in touch with people. I still see videos of people playing beer die together, all that kind of stuff. But when you're passionate enough about something, you gotta drop whatever you're doing and go chase it. And that's what I did. And I think in the data science, or really the sports in general, like the jobs are so few and hard to find, you gotta be willing to do that. Because if you're not willing to drop whatever you're doing to go pursue it, there's 1,000 people who are. So you gotta have that in mind and know that if you want this bad enough, you gotta do whatever it takes to get to it.
How has sports analytics changed? Because I mean, you and I have both been doing this for several years now. How has this industry changed from when you graduated from college and what you are doing now?
I mean, the biggest thing I think is just the sheer embrace from the pro and even college teams in terms of how they want to use it to impact winning. I mean, I know you follow Seth Walder on Twitter. I'm sure some people in your class also do, and that's kind of the easiest way to visualize it. Every year he tweets out his thing where it's like the list of every NFL staffer he can compile. And 5 years ago, it was probably one or two people per team. Now it's probably averaging five or so per team, if I'm ballpark guessing. It's just pretty exponential growth. And then, baseball, basketball were pretty far ahead, so they kind of already had a lot of people, but football's really catching up in that regard. So I think the biggest thing I point to is, like I said, just teams understanding it's going to help them win. But the secondary point I'd also make, I think, is also the fan experience too. Like think about when I was a kid, watching be at a baseball game, 15, 20 years ago, kind of you'd see the big three stats like average, home runs, RBI, and the jumbotron. That was like unanimous. And nowadays, you go to a game, you'll see the exit velocity or the launch angle or the whiff rate, and like spin rate of the pitcher. It's like, okay, now it's not just a thing that helps teams win. It's also how can we educate the fans and let them know more about whatever sport they're watching. Football's the same way. You're seeing PFF grades all over TV now. You're seeing the ESPN or Next Gen Stats recommendations. Should you go for it or kick the field goal or punt? So not only are team front offices benefiting for this, but also they're trying to find ways to make the fans more knowledgeable of the game. So it's kind of that dual growth of not only teams getting better, but also fans learning more about the sports they're watching.
And why do you suppose, and since you and I both spent time at the NFL, we can talk about this. Why is it so important that the fan become more knowledgeable when it comes to, what these tools are and why teams are embracing them, why the league's embracing them, all of that stuff?
Because like in general, like anything in life, not just sports, you want to be knowledgeable about what you're talking about. So if you're having a conversation at, the barbershop or a sports bar or wherever you are about the decisions your coach made that you like or didn't like, you kind of want to have that ammo behind you of why do I think the decision was good or it wasn't good. So yeah, I think that's just kind of the fans are gonna really like the players or coaches or not like them, whatever their opinion is, they want to have better rationale behind that. And I think that's becoming a lot more possible nowadays than it was in past years.
When it comes to basically the inner workings of an organization, I know it's something where data scientists, they go into a place and they have things that they want to work on. There were things when we were at the NFL we wanted to work on. At the same time, there are also asks and demands from management and other folks who have clout in terms of looking up certain things and maybe rearranging databases, all that fun stuff. How do you kind of balance the independent motivations to whatever the organization is requiring you to do?
I would say the balance is basically 1 to 99 in the latter direction you mentioned. Obviously we all have, we have, I can't really specify what the projects are, but we got a whiteboard of kind of long-term projects idea we want to pursue. But the bottom line is if a coach or scout or GM walks in here, they have a question, that question becomes priority number one right away. Whatever the hell you were doing before that, put on standby, circle back to it later that week or maybe even beyond that. But yeah, we know like when the big dogs come talking, any coach, any scout, like we know that's the top priority. We gotta give them the information, help them do their job better. So it's always, put the team first, we over me, as people say.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's something I know, players are taught and most everyone at every level is taught, and data science is no different.
Yeah, absolutely. Even though we're not literally playing, we're still part of this team. So we got to figure out what we can do to make the team do their jobs better. That's what we're here to do.
Mhm. How much has artificial intelligence impacted what you do?
Um, I would say still very little at this point. I mean, maybe that could change going forward, but I still think the only way it really impacts at this point, at least personally speaking, and maybe other people have different opinions, but for me, it's like, if I'm coding an R, I'm kind of stuck on something at home, like maybe I'll use an AI tool to figure out like, hey, the scrap doesn't look the way I want it to look, like maybe that can help me out. But overall, it's still, one of my favorite sayings is the game ain't played on Excel, and it doesn't have to be literally Excel using, you could say GPT or R or whatever technology you want to replace that with. But the bottom line is, as much as analytics can help a team win, help you build a roster, help your in-game decisions, help your opponent scouting, your self-scouting, the bottom line is it's still a game driven by humans, and you need to build the right culture with the right people in the building. You need to have the right emotion on game day to be ready to be, tough and nasty on the field. Just a game defined by violence. So again, I think AI will continue to help us more, like especially like in the coding aspect, it can be an assistant tool, but bottom line is that you always need the right people in your building to win. That's, I think, going to be still the case, even, 30, 50 or more years from now. It's, all about the people.
For sure, for sure. Before I open it up to the class, because I know the students have plenty of questions for you, what is some general advice you would give to those who are going out into the world when it comes to positioning themselves in the best possible way to get a data science job at another NFL team or, NFL or anything of the sort?
I mean, there's so much I could say on that topic from my years hunting, and I could probably write a book on it. But I'll try to at least limit to a few points. I don't take up all day here. And for starters, you always hear about the networking trip about it's all about who you know. That's definitely not wrong, but I think what matters equally as much is not just who you know, but also what you've done. Because ultimately, if your best friend is Brandon Bean's son or whatever, name whatever coach or GM you want, like if you have that kind of connection, but a connection doesn't believe in you, they have no reason to know that you know your stuff. The connection really goes nowhere. So it's not about just who you know, but also can you show that people I actually can do the work you need me to do. And for me personally, that meant a lot of side projects. I used to write for Football Outsiders before they went extinct, sadly. Used to write for SB Nation for a bit and did my own Substack page that still exists, just not putting more on there right now, obviously. So public work is a huge thing to do to get your name on that. And then simultaneously, I think volunteer work, if it's financially viable for you, is a really huge thing as well. Like, I spent 2 summers at UCLA, 2019 and 2021. Even though I didn't make a dime, still just showing the people in the industry how badly you want to be there and just making those connections that are going to pay off later is really huge. I know it's not viable for everybody. Like, me personally, I mentioned I had, the very much the get out of jail free card of the free rent, which was huge. I did some math tutoring on the side to help support me during those times. But if it's viable for you, volunteer work is huge because it's really how you show you want this as badly as anybody. And beyond that, another core tip I'd say is really try to be a master of one trade, not a jack of all trades. Think about work and life in sort of a lens of Madden or 2K. You don't want to be an 80 overall at everything because there's no jobs that pay you to be an 80 overall at everything. You got to figure out your one thing you're going to be 99 overall at, be hired for that specific thing. Because if I was talking to myself of 5-6 years ago at that point, I kind of did a little bit of various things. Like I did some journalism, did some analytics, some scouting. Had played football in college, so I kind of was good at a lot of different football realms. I didn't have the one thing I was an expert at. So I think I kind of had the epiphany later in life, like, okay, I got to buy in and figure out what is my calling card and become really, really good at that thing. It's eventually crack the doors of an office, which that obviously became analytics, slash coding and doing projects like that. And Big Datable, obviously another big one in that regard. And that led to where I am today. So really, I would emphasize, it doesn't have to be today. I know your class got a lot of young kids. You don't have to figure out your whole life plan right now, but at some point in life, figure out what's your calling card, what's your, so to speak, 99 overall, and go attack that with everything you got.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Let me go open it up to the room. And who has a question for Cole? Go for it.
I think this is kind of just a simple one, but what does a typical work week look like for you?
Typical work week.
I can't say too much specific details, but to broadly summarize, I would say my personal weeks are much more catered towards long-term projects that'll be helpful during free agency and draft season with a little bit of the kind of short-term opponent scouting. But on average, like my two colleagues, Santino and Dennis, they handle more of the shorter-term stuff where my role is kind of being that long-term guy, stuff that'll help us out, a few months down the road. But like I said, stuff can vary. If a coach or scout walks in with a request, that request is your most important priority. So you got to be willing to wear a lot of hats for sure.
Awesome. Who else has a question? Yeah.
There's like the off season, like since like you spend a lot of time like prepping maybe for coaches week to week. Like what does the off season look like? And like you get requests to like look into specific players maybe for like free agency or draft and things like that.
What does your off season look like, and how does free agency impact all of your various activities?
I'm probably not that qualified to answer that yet because I only started in July, but at least from what I've heard from people that have been here before me is that, I think draft season especially is a very heavy time for our department because trying to find ways to evaluate college players in ways beyond what the box score says, what the scouts' opinions are based on the tape. So basically I've heard it's, there's really never nothing to do because when the playoffs is done, which hopefully is very late, hopefully in February, then, you're already in the combine draft season and free agency happens in March as well. And then after that's done, it's almost time for training camp again. So there's really almost never no obligations, but yeah, what you're focusing on shifts, based on the time of year. And I'm looking forward to seeing that for the first time, up close this spring.
Mhm. It is interesting because JJ Zacharyson, who does fantasy football, the way he kind of characterizes it is that the season in season work is very left brained, where you're keeping up with who's injured and who's playing well and how to adjust rosters and all that good stuff. And definitely when we were at the NFL, kind of felt that way too, where it did feel very left brained. And then during the off season, yeah, you have the combine, you have the draft, all that good stuff, but it feels a little bit more right brained when it is the off season because you're working on so many other projects and trying to look at things in a more creative light. And I'm curious if again, I know you just started, but if that is a fair characterization for what most all of us do in the football realm in data science.
Yeah, I definitely think it's pretty fair because even from my exposure this summer, like, when I was here during training camp in July and even during preseason as well here, because we're not doing that much opponent scouting during preseason, like we definitely kind of have that luxury to, like you said, use that right side of your brain, kind of think more the longer term, a little more creative with what projects we might pursue in the future. Whereas this time of year, especially for the two guys behind me, it's much more about treading water, figuring out, okay, we're playing this team this Sunday. We got to obsess over everything they do for these 5 days, and then rinse and repeat the next week. And you kind of just because that's so time between, you don't have very much room to explore other ideas. But yeah, you got to be malleable to the situation and know sometimes you have a sharp deadline, sometimes you have more room for your creativity to expand on things. But it's all about situational awareness of what the people in the building need and how you can help them the most.
Awesome. Who else has a question? Yeah.
What's something that you wish you knew at this point, like when you were in college, coming out as a senior, that maybe would have gotten you on a faster path to get to where you're at now? Yeah.
Yeah, good question for sure. I guess one thing, kind of like I alluded to earlier, is sort of that earlier specialization. I would say, yeah, kind of like I mentioned, I think I sort of dipped my toe in a lot of waters in terms of journalism, in terms of scouting, in terms of playing slash coaching, in terms of obvious analytics as well. So I think earlier specialization could have been useful. I guess point number two, I would say, is really related to that, but I definitely would have liked to code earlier in life. I think it would have set me on a better trajectory. Like I really first only learned R, summer entering my senior year of college, and I was 21, and my then girlfriend nagged me to do it, and her tone was annoying, but she was ultimately right. She definitely helped me get to where I am today. But yeah, I think if I, say if I'd started at 18 instead of 21, just thinking of the extrapolation, like where I could be today, I'd be even further ahead ideally. And I guess third and final point is really just enjoy where you're at. Ultimately, no matter what career field you're in, you have age 22 to 72 to worry about what job you're going to get. Whereas the years you're in college, those when they're gone, they're gone. And I still talk to so many of my friends from Penn, the guys I played football with, or was in a fraternity with, people that we all look back in those years fondly now that we're almost 30. So just appreciate the time you got. It's only there for so long, and then it doesn't mean don't try to get a job. Obviously, still attack the job market the way you would normally, but don't forget to enjoy where you're at because that time is temporary.